From Wakefield, it's the Nolan Clarinet Show. I'm Nolan, and his guest this week, Mark Searles to the show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Nolan.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the show. Joining me this week is a very special guest. I've grown up with him in Rhode Island, watching the news, watching him share the weather, see if I can wear either short sleeves in our t-shirt, although nowadays it is more now of a long sleeve shirt and some long jeans. He is the one and only, the very talented and award-winning meteorologist, Mark Searles. Mark, how are you today?
Hey, no, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, of course, as I said, now that I've had Anthony, I've had you, I got to work on RJ, and then we got to keep building up. So we have
you're going to build a team.
Yeah, build the top team in Rhode Island and Southern New England. I'm pleased to have you on here. So again, thanks. I want to start sort like this. You being frequent, and you've been someone who has been able to experience it from maybe not just your perspective, but the perspective of your colleagues the last 3 years of the craziness that has been the pandemic. At this point, from your perspective, what's life been like now that things have sort of quieted down in one sense after the 3 years?
Well, so I guess I'll start with from like a personal level of all that. My daughter was in that unfortunate class graduating high school in 2020. So she was that first year, maybe that only year, where everybody's graduation, prom, and et cetera was canceled. And that was hard for as a parent to see her go through that and have to, miss out on a lot of the joy that I personally was fortunate enough to have when I was a high school student, and her mother was, and then of course she went off to college, and it was a very strange first year of college for her. And that was hard. It's hard to see that. Our younger kids certainly were affected by it too, not to that extent, but I didn't really enjoy that part of the pandemic. I mean, from me personally, like we don't go out too much. My wife and I are sort of homebodies on the weekends because I'm here late at night, Monday through Friday, so we sort of enjoy our quiet at home time on the weekend. So that phase of not going to restaurants and not going to concerts or movie theaters, like I was okay with that for a little while. I sort of, I definitely hated wearing the mask thing. So glad that that's over. But from a work standpoint, we were able to sort of figure out some things on our end, which was pretty cool. I was able to work at home for those first few months, basically from like late March through June of 2020. I had set up a home broadcast area, and we were able to use technology, to remote into our weather computers, and I was able to control it from home and look at all the information that I normally look at here at work. I was able to do that from home. So it was nice to be able to say, okay, if this were to happen again, in certain circumstances, if need be, I can do this from home. So it was kind of a cool learning experience. I did also find out that it's just much easier from a workflow standpoint for me to be here with all this stuff versus home. But again, in a pinch, I could do it. I could do it from home. So that was cool to find out.
What's one thing, and I've learned this from those who have had on various different fields, that they've been able to sort of look back on what they've learned. So what's one thing Mark Searles has learned about himself during the pandemic that I didn't know about himself prior?
What did I learn about myself? Let's see. Well, I do find that I'm first of all, I'm a germaphobe, and I learned that I'm even more so a germaphobe now, post pandemic. So that's true. I've always, you can ask everybody here at work, I've been a big hand sanitizer guy for a long time. And I never really enjoyed the flu and cold season and being indoors. I'm more of an outdoor kind of guy. So, being cooped up is not good.
Sure.
For me personally, it's not. I don't think it's for a lot of people. A lot of people don't enjoy that. So, I guess it just sort of reaffirmed that I really do enjoy space, outdoor space. Yeah.
Like your colleague Dan Janning, and the big outdoorsman that he is, as well as he shared with me. Now, I sort of want to turn back the clock as much as I can with you at the beginning of this conversation. Now, most kids, regardless of how old they are or what generation they come from, they all dream about playing in the Super Bowl, playing in the NBA, and all sorts of that stuff. But for you, how early on do you remember you having aspirations or an enjoyment, enthusiasm for the weather and meteorology and that sort of stuff?
So I definitely always loved weather. Loved watching weather. And actually, I love watching news. Both my parents were big news consumers from as early as I can remember. I'm the youngest of three. My brother and sister really had moved out of the house. There's a large age gap between the two of them and myself. So I kind of grew up at home just with my mom and dad. They're both teachers, and they were both very well read. Always read the newspaper. Always had a book going, etc. And my dad in particular is a huge sports fan, big sports guy, and that trickled down to me. So we would spend the nights growing up in Massachusetts. I grew up in Seekonk. We had the benefit of watching both Rhode Island and Boston, Massachusetts news. So we would always watch the evening newscasts on channels 10 and in particular mostly channel 10, but we watched a little channel 12, not gonna lie, back in the day, and then we would flip it over to the Boston stations. So I always thought that was really cool to be able to see that. And we always timed it so that we would catch the weather and the sports in Providence, and then I could catch the weather and the sports in Boston.
Yeah.
So and I grew up watching John Giorgi here on Channel 10. I don't know if you were old enough to remember John, but he was my mentor. He was the first television meteorologist in this market. He started in Channel 10 in the 1960s, late 1960s. And then I had the honor of interning with him when he was at Channel 6. I was my first TV job, was working alongside him at Channel 6. And then when I came over here, he had already been back to Channel 10. So we worked together. And that's really a big influence on me. Now I can tell you this though, I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing even through high school.
Sure.
Like public speaking to me was really something that I had to work at. I never really liked having eyes on me. Seeing people's reactions and being the focus of their criticism. That was never really anything I wanted any part of. So I went to school for engineering initially, college, and changed my major in my junior year to atmospheric science. And that was really as a result of doing an internship that summer with John and other meteorologists at Channel 6, and said, hey, you know what? This is pretty fun. It has this team aspect, kind of like sports, which I played all my life. I always have loved weather. And there's obviously, I was an aerospace engineering major. There were some elements that kind of crossed over seamlessly for me with that. So it all kind of worked out for me in the end. But I didn't.
Sure.
I wasn't 6 years old saying I got to be on TV. I want to be a weatherman. No, that wasn't that. I was not that kid.
Anthony told me about his stories when I had him on about where he went to school in Vermont and how that's sort of a well-known school for meteorology and that sort of stuff. So for you, what was the aspiration or not satisfaction, but interest in terms of going all the way out west to UC Boulder and although you started with engineering, but you switched to the other degree that you graduated with, was it known for, a program such as that, or was it just because of the weather out there?
Yeah, no, I went out there for aerospace engineering. They have a very strong engineering program. They've also developed in the last several decades the nation's best atmospheric science program. So that's really, it's an awesome school to study that. The National Center for Atmospheric Research, NCAR, is the acronym. They are centered in Boulder, Colorado. They work directly with NOAA as well as other private research entities. So it's a great place to learn. I had the benefit my entire senior year of interning at the NBC affiliate in Denver. So I used to borrow a friend's car a couple of times a week and drive from Boulder to Denver. It was about a 40-minute drive. And that was really cool for me to really see at a large market. There was a young chief meteorologist there at the time. He was like in his 30s, and it was inspirational to me, as well as being able to come back to Providence with John, et cetera. So, I knew I wanted to be away from home. I love to ski. But back and it's ridiculous now because I've got one daughter in college, another one that's a senior in high school looking at colleges. But the way that I chose my colleges largely had to do with the football program at the time. And my two top schools, 1989 and 1990, the University of Colorado was one of the best, if not the best. They won the national championship my freshman year in 1990. So I wanted great college Division I football, and I got all that. I got great skiing, world-class football, and a great education. So I feel like I hit it out of the ballpark.
I'm surprised you didn't stay out there longer then in terms of the atmosphere out there, but nothing beats around. Everyone from Colorado then comes to Rhode Island for the summer weather.
Totally. Well, I mean, first of all, this is home, born and raised in Seekonk. I think my mom was really fearful that I would not come home, and I probably would have at least lingered out there for a while if it weren't that I had a job offer to come back and do some really get myself in front of the TV camera at Channel 6 and practice that summer. I ended up getting my first TV job in Vermont later that fall. So, if that didn't happen, who knows what would have been the case? Maybe I would have stayed out there, worked at a ski area, or got into something totally different.
Sure.
Then things would have been different, but it worked out.
Yeah, you mentioned your relationship and bond with John Giorgi and how you interned with him. That changed your mind to then major in something else. What was it about him that made you make that sudden decision to change all the way into your junior year to atmospheric science?
Yeah, John was always for a man at the time when I met him for the first time. He was well established. He'd been in his career for decades, but he still loved weather. He still got excited about a big storm, and that enthusiasm I saw right away. And of course, I was giddy anytime we'd get a thunderstorm or any kind of significant weather. Forget if it was a snowstorm or a tropical storm. My goodness, it really went off the charts. But it was great to see someone with his experience and had seen dozens and dozens of these events over his career already to get as excited as I was. That rubbed off on me, and I said, well, that's pretty cool. I could see myself doing this. Plus, I didn't know a thing about television. I didn't, talking to people, articulating an idea, I could have a good idea. The weather might do this, but how do I explain that?
Sure.
Without sounding like a fool and, messing up, my graphics and television graphics were just coming on board at that time. Technology and the computers are making it much more easy to create these graphics. So that was happening in front of me.
Sure.
The internet was just coming out at that time when I was coming out of college. So it was like this information boom was occurring, and it was really cool to be part of all of that, to see all that and how that helped improve forecasting. And like experienced forecasters like John and the others, like they just embraced that. It's like, this was awesome, because all of a sudden they had more information at their hands much more quickly than they ever did before. So it ultimately just helped improve our forecasting, and it's been great. It's been great to be part of that.
You, prior to working at NBC 10, where you've been there for the last countless years, as you mentioned, working in Vermont, you worked for their ABC affiliate before coming to Rhode Island's affiliate for years, where you're also the chief meteorologist. You interned with John, but then you also had the chance, I'm sure, probably to work with him.
Yep.
Not just at ABC 10, but had you worked with him at ABC 6 here in Rhode Island?
Yeah. I worked with him, as an intern, like summers of 92, 93, or maybe 93, 92, 93. And then in 94, I got hired there, and I worked part-time until 96 with him. And then I was full-time from 96. I think he left in 98 to come back to Channel 10. So, I worked about 13 and a half years at Channel 6. And then I'm in my 15th year here now, I think. So, that's how they can tell you how old I am. Right. But, I worked probably only about less than a year until he retired. When I came over to Channel 10, he retired in early 09. So.
What was that like, though, going from someone who watched him, idolized him as a weatherman, to then intern with him, to then now getting an opportunity to work with him? Pretty
cool. I mean, it was a great experience. One of the things that I'm most proud about is that here at Channel 10, right? It's we're the big dog. Everybody watches Channel 10. We're very blessed because we've got great viewers and loyalty. But I'm only the third chief meteorologist at the station, and this station has been on the air for 70 years. Wow. So, John was the first chief meteorologist in the 60s. And then, of course, it was Gary Lay. And I worked alongside Gary, who was great to work with. And I learned tons from him as well. And then now I'm number 3 in terms of that. So I take that, as a big badge of honor to be able to call myself the station's chief meteorologist, and only 2 others that I've looked up to, 2 guys that I grew up watching, sure, and Gary and John. I think that's just really cool. Not a lot of people can say that, and now I've got people that, reporters that work here, and they say the same thing that you did. Like, I grew up watching you. And I think that's pretty cool. And I think for them, it's like, this was the station that we watched. And
sure,
I'm like, I can relate to that because I was you. This is the station that I grew up watching. And when I started here, I was like, wow, this is really cool. This is Channel 10. I feel like I finally had made it.
Sure.
I'm working at Channel 10 now. And that's really neat.
Well, that's what I admire, I think, about the channel so much. And I told this to Dan, the NBC 10 is the channel of preference, no offense to other channels, in the Carr household. And big fans and supporters of that. But it's something that I find admirable. I'm sure everyone else does, that there is such a longevity with the people who work for the station, who were there long time. You've been there for a while. Obviously, Frank's been there forever. Patrice was in there forever.
Sure.
Dan's been there for a good chunk of time. And then those who just recently retired over the last few years. And I think that probably shows the trust that the station has within the people who work for them, but also that people are tuning in so much that they enjoy who they see on TV. I asked this maybe to Anthony when I had him on a while ago, and Dan as well. Although what meteorology isn't maybe necessarily just like sports, where sports, it's sort of the same thing in the sense of weather's different. It changes all the time. Hurricane Ian just happened, and you can't always predict everything that happens. But for you, you mentioned getting a job the fall after you graduate. How did you deal early on with those? Maybe I don't want to say we're enemies, but people who were critiquing your ability as a meteorologist compared to maybe now how you deal with the criticism nowadays.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think certainly early in my career, I was very sensitive to that. And I think that's human nature, who likes to be criticized?
Yeah.
No, nobody wants to be told, man, your forecast was terrible. You look terrible. I mean, I've had tons of compliments in my career, but I've also had a lot of negative things thrown my way. And the way I react to it now versus how I reacted to it then is much different. I let 99% of that stuff roll off my back and not let it bother me. And I also try not to get too bloated of a head about the compliments either, because it comes and it goes. It comes with the territory. We put ourselves out there. We're in the public eye. We are wide open to criticism. What I can tell you what I've done is I've really just stopped looking at social media altogether. We post and we share a ton of content, Twitter and Facebook, but that is Twitter in particular, I feel like is a cesspool for negativity. And I don't need that in my life. Nobody needs that in their life. So I'll go there. I'll give you some content, what you do with it. If you want the information or you don't, you want to tell me that my tie looks ridiculous, whatever you want to say. Odds are I'm not going to see it.
Sure.
So, and that's just the way it is. That's the one part of the job that you can get. And I noticed that with some of the younger people, they are very much into the social media aspect of this. And maybe that'll change with them down the road. But again, these are people and you're part of it that have just grown up knowing nothing else.
Exactly.
Other than this. So that's just part of your life. And for those of us that remember what life was like without the internet, without the smartphone, in simpler times, right? So I know I sound like your grandparents probably when I say that, but that's sort of the truth. There's some good aspects of it and some bad aspects of it. And I try not to dwell too much on the negative. I try to dwell absolutely zero on the negative and not, like I say, not pay too much attention to the positives. It's nice to hear it. Constructive criticism, 100%. I want to hear it. If you think, hey, I'd like to hear more, marine forecasts specific, or maybe mention this part of the area a little bit more because you tend to ignore it. I get that. And I can fall victim to that as well. So I do like that. But if you're going to come at it with a harsh criticism tone I get it.
It's not, well, true. That's with, I think, anything in life. Mentioning going from ABC to NBC 10, you then make the transition in 2008 over to NBC 10, where you've been ever since. Growing up, you mentioned watching the channel, tuning into that, as well as the Boston channels.
Yep.
What was like that in terms of personal accomplishment, but also professionally? What was that like for you?
It was great. It was great. I'll tell you, I worked hard to get here. It was difficult to get in, and I had tried for years, and with a lot of rejection, and also with some constructive criticism from some of the bosses here at NBC 10. You too youthful of a look. Your hair is too short. You're not as experienced as we would like, et cetera, et cetera. So, but they gave me some points to work on, and I tried to really take that and go with it. I learned sort of early on in my career, once I got married and once we started having children. My wife's family's from Rhode Island. Obviously, I'm from Southeastern Mass. So I knew this is kind of where we wanted to be geographically. I had lived out west. I had family that lives down south. Like, there are only a few areas in this country that interest me to work in and live in, raise a family in. And this was choice number one, was to stay here. So I was very fortunate to have had a nice position at Channel 6 for so many years. And then, I was extremely fortunate to finally get the call from Channel 10 to bring me in when they did. And I've been part of, a transition in local media. There's no denying that national and local media is changing dramatically in front of our eyes. And it's, it's pretty cool to be part of that. My hometown.
Well, I had just asked you about, or I just said about the longevity of some of the people you've worked with. Entering that, though, is, I'm sure, terrifying or nervous in the sense of you're around a bunch of heavyweights, those who have been there forever, and they're, scared or worriedness isn't as public, or you can tell they're more used to what happens throughout the job. Entering that compared to now being one of those people who've been there for a while, what's that like to be part of a station who trusts their workers so much? Yeah, no,
I appreciate that. And I know that working for this station in particular, a lot of responsibility comes along with that people do trust us when, certainly when the storms, and I try to, articulate that to Anthony, Christina. We have a new member of our team that you haven't seen yet, but his name is Jason, and he'll be on the air pretty soon. He works with us on the digital side of things right now. Like, the good thing is that they're all local.
Yeah.
And especially Anthony and Jason, they're from Rhode Island. They're born and raised. Christina's from Massachusetts. So they get it. They know. And I try to just say, hey, listen, when it's sunny and 75 degrees, that's great. But people really need us. It used to be just a handful of times a year. Now it's several dozen times a year, the way that weather's changing.
Yeah.
That we need to be on our game when there's a big storm. And we need to relay that information, as accurately and as in such an understandable nature as possible for people. And I always thought about my mom and dad watching. Now they've passed away, but they're an elderly couple sitting at home. I've got to present my forecast in a way that they would understand it.
Yeah.
Because truly that's where our responsibility starts there, and it kind of trickles down. Make it and to do it in a non excitable way, don't hype it, but really try to get the point across and really hammer home, what some of the most important elements are. So it's a craft, and it's an art that takes some time to develop that, to be able to really get the most important elements out in a concise manner. And I still fail at it sometimes. I try to go back and watch and be like, okay, I could have done this better. This graphic could have been a little bit more clear, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just a responsibility that I take very, very strongly.
Hurricane Ian just did a huge beating to Florida and the Caribbeans as well. One of my coworkers in South Kingston was just in Aruba, and she was telling us about how nervous it was flying back and the weather there. And then we just got here and on the East Coast and in Rhode Island, a lot of rain as of lately. And when you're prepared, when this sort of thing happens, and although it may not directly hit South Rhode Island or southern New England, how do you prepare for this nowadays compared to maybe how you were doing at the beginning of your career?
Yeah. So, I mean, like in terms of covering Ian and even Fiona before it, because Fiona, moved across Puerto Rico. And of course, we all remember Maria 5 years prior, what it did to the island, still hasn't recovered from that. We have a large population here in southern New England that either are from Puerto Rico and the Dominican, or they have relatives, or they have property there. So we obviously tried to articulate that, the messaging there, even though, hey, it's not hitting us, but we know some of you are worried about it. Florida, obviously much more so. There's a huge, southern New England, Florida connection. There's a ton of people that either have moved there or have property there or have family members there. So this was a big deal. And we really were on top of that for a while. And, looking back at this, there's going to be a lot of lessons that'll be learned from Ian, unfortunately. But as you know, and a lot of the people that might be watching right now know that the deadliest part of these hurricanes and tropical systems is the water, it's the storm surge. That's like 90% of people who die from these storms are a result of flood water, whether it's heavy rain or in particularly it's the storm surge. So the point here is, we're not crying wolf. The National Hurricane Center isn't crying wolf. These storms, what happened with Ian was it strengthened right before landfall. It shifted its position, and the storm surge nearly doubled at the time that it hit. And if you're told to evacuate, or you're in a zone that is either told to or encouraged to evacuate, you really have got to think about it. What's the big deal? If it doesn't live up to your expectations, and hey, so what? You feel lucky.
Yeah.
This time around, that was a horrific scene. And I said this, I think, on the air earlier today. It's like, this is 2022. Nobody should die from a flood, from a hurricane that we've seen coming for days in advance, and you've been told to evacuate. What are you doing? What are you staying at home for? What do you think you're going to do?
Yeah.
If the flood comes, you're not going to stop it.
Sure.
Like, what's the point of you staying in your home, right? On Sanibel Island, Captiva. I mean, they're like 4 or 5 feet above sea level with an 18-foot storm surge. Like, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah.
It's sad and it's tragic what happened, but so much of that could have been avoided if people had just listened and evacuated. And it's a horrible lesson to have to learn, but hopefully the next time people will just get out.
Well, it's scary when you have to sit on countertops at your house and you have to sit on your roof, and when you see videos of the doors imploding in because there's so much water pressure on them, or when you see wildlife swimming through the streets of Florida Downs. That's not the most prettiest of heartwarming scenarios when you see an alligator or a shark swimming through your neighborhood road, but that's what happens sometimes when the
that's exactly what happened there. Yeah. And now somebody's got to come and rescue you. So now you're putting someone else's life in danger to come and save you because you chose not to get out when you were either encouraged or, required to do so. So I can't believe the death toll is well over 100 right now. And it's probably going to go even higher. That's just so sad and unnecessary.
Well, you just mentioned, risking others' lives. And that brings up my next question. You've had your fair share of reporting weather storms and severe situations, maybe of that nature, but maybe not of that nature. Nowadays, though, in your role now at NBC 10, what do you share with the younger staff of meteorologists that have to go out and report these type of stories and report the weather from locations?
Yeah, just about accurate information, trying to relay, like I said, trying to relay and articulate the most important information, not be, hyping it up, not trying to be over dramatic, but actually giving the accurate report. What's happening? Is the worst behind us? I think that as a viewer, here are a couple of the key elements, like in a storm. Okay, if you still have your power on now, chances are you're going to retain your power because the worst of the wind's behind us. I think that's critical information, right? We always have a tendency to use, phrases like, well, the worst is yet to come and there's still several more hours, et cetera, et cetera. But you don't need to scare people.
Sure.
If like I feel as though for this instance, we've had this coastal storm for days. I think the worst wind's behind us. So that's good news, right?
Yeah.
It was gusting to 50, 55 on Sunday. Today was only 30. Tomorrow might be 25 to 30. So there's good news. Like, things are getting better. Try to give hope. We're in a time where we need a little bit of good news once in a while. We don't constantly need to be bombarded with negativity on the financial world, negativity from the COVID world, negativity from school or work and weather. It's like the last thing in the world you want is a bad weather forecast. We all want to know the weekend's going to be maybe hopeful, have some sunshine. So trying to not gloss over, but if there's an opportunity to give some positive news, like, bring that out too. And don't be afraid to say, hey, you know what? Things are better out here. And that's not, it doesn't always have to be doom and gloom.
I asked this and I chuckled when I asked both of them, but I had Joe and when I had Frank on as well, I asked them this question and I'm curious on what your answer is. Now, my question to you is, knowing that you're an active guy as well as Dan is and Joe and Frank, if you had to pick add the other two, Joe and Frank, to play 2-on-2 basketball with against Dan, who would it be and why?
So I have to pick
either Frank or Joe.
Oh, well, that's a good question. I mean, I don't think you go wrong with either one. I think Carpano could post up Dan pretty well, and obviously there's a similarity in height between the two of them. But Joe's faster. Joe's younger than me. Joe's younger than all of us.
Okay.
So there's that element too. So perhaps we could count on his youth. I've never seen either shoot a basketball. So I don't know. I wouldn't know the question. I guess I'd have to have a tryout to see who could shoot better before I could make that decision, because I'd have to beat Janig. There's no way I would.
Well, maybe I'll change Janig out and put Anthony in, because you both are weathermen and then those two are both sports guys.
All right. So I would give Anthony I feel like if I gave Anthony Carpano and I took Kayada, I think we could take him.
Okay.
How's that?
Yeah.
But I definitely wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want Carpano and Janig against me and Kayada. They would have a significant size advantage.
Yes, they both are quite tall guys. Now, the last question I'll ask you for the little game I have is, and maybe for your area of meteorology, maybe a little too hard to say, oh, I want to cover this type of thing, maybe such as weather or sports. But is there a type of maybe weather pattern or weather storm or something of that nature in meteorology that you hope to cover before you close up shop?
Let's see. I've covered just about everything. We've had plenty of tornadoes in the last couple of years. We've had hurricanes, tropical storms, snowstorms. I mean, the derecho is, we've had a few of those nearby, but we've never truly had one blow through Rhode Island and southeastern Mass. So that's just a big line of thunderstorms and strong wind that sustains itself for miles upon miles. I don't know if I'd want that. Droughts. I mean, I really don't want to wish for any kind of catastrophic type of weather event and be on record of saying that I'm wishing for it. I've never seen the Northern Lights. So I guess I'd like to see the Northern Lights.
Sure.
That would be a pretty cool phenomenon to check out in person.
Yeah.
Not
as severe and destroying as the other ones.
I don't want anything destroyed. No, we don't want to destroy anything. I don't want that.
Especially after the last 3 years. Now, before we go, I'd like to say thank you again for doing this. I want to end on a little segment called the One Word Challenge. So what this entails is I'll throw a few names of people or places or things that have some connection to my guest, this week being the amazing Mark Searles. And he has to do his best to say a word or two or sentence, whatever he feels, that best describes when he hears the word or phrase. So Mark, are you ready?
Okay. I think I'm ready. I'm nervous.
First one, Seekonk.
Home.
Providence.
Restaurants.
John Giorgi.
Mentor.
NBC 10.
It's 2 words. It's work home.
Success.
Well, success is happiness.
Weather.
Important.
And last but certainly never least in this cosmic universe we all live in, Mark Searles. Friendly? I hope to be. I think certainly more than friendly, good sir. Well, I want to say sincerely, this has been a treat. As I said, and I also said this to Frank and Dan, although I don't want to seem like it's the same thing, but I appreciate the time that you took to come on here and set some time aside to do this. It means a great deal to talk with someone who I saw on television. So thanks again.
Hey, Nolan, I'm pleased that you asked me to do it. And thank you for doing this and helping all of us, reach your audience and show a different side of us than what people see on the news every night.
Well, of course. And as I always say, because who the heck wouldn't next time when my guest this week, Mark Searles, wins an Emmy for his wonderful broadcast of meteorology work, you'll say, holy crap, I should have subscribed back then when I did. So follow, like, comment, share, subscribe. Follow on Twitter, Nolan Carr at Night Show. No, Nolan Carr at Night, and then Instagram, Nolan Carr at Night Show, for all your updates and news regarding more episodes. And Mark, is there anything that you would like to put out there or share with people out there that may be in the Southern New England area?
Yeah, no. Thank you for watching Nolan, subscribing. Definitely subscribe to Nolan, yes. And thank you for turning to NBC 10. And we appreciate it. Stay with us. There's a lot more great things to come here, both on Nolan Show and on NBC 10.
Listen to the man. He knows what he's talking about. He's an award winner. Anyways, in the words of Johnny Carson, the dean of talk shows, I bid you all a heartfelt good night. Till next time, take care.